Welcome to the Heartland Journals podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, here's a novel idea. Pass it around. Please subscribe. That is the only way that we grow, and it really helps. So thanks for doing it. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. What a cool job, right? Today we are talking with special guest Chris Fenton. Chris is the author of Feeding the Dragon: Inside the Trillion-Dollar Dilemma Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business. He's been featured on CNBC This Morning, New York Times, Washington Post, BBC, NPR, Wall Street Journal, Tucker Carlson Tonight, Fox News, CNN, Bloomberg, Fox Sports, Maria Bartiromo, Fast Company, Los Angeles Times, South China Morning Post, Salt Talks, Sky News, War Room, Adam Carolla Show, CNBC, Outkick, Fox Business, and as of today, the Heartland Journal podcast. He finally made it to the big time. Just kidding. Feeding the Dragon, a deeply revealing memoir of big wins and hard lessons from a seasoned executive caught smack in the middle of the trillion-dollar soft power struggle pitting China against Hollywood, the NBA, and big business. Wow, go out and get that today. Chris, hello, how are you today?
I'm great. I mean, if we're talking truth, this is the best show I've been on out of all those. So here we go.
That's it. That's it. It's the only one. And I could have listed a lot more, but I ran out of breath. Where is that beautiful view behind you?
That is Manhattan Beach. So we're just a little north of a park called Bruce's Beach. I'm a couple houses off of the Strand, and it's my little surf spot, and it's where I find my happy place every day. And if I can have the pleasure of working from home and being on cool shows from this backdrop behind me, count me a very lucky man.
Okay, I'm not paying you for this. So you don't have to say nice things anymore, but at least it's not Pacific Palisades, because then you would have a lot of smoke behind you. So I'm glad you're down there instead.
A very unfortunate one. In fact, we could see those fires from here, and that was about as eerie a 4-day period as I've ever seen, and it hasn't gotten much better since.
Apocalyptic, yeah. A lot of friends and coworkers probably displaced.
Yeah, it's I mean, not only do we have a major disruption going on technology-wise, market-wise, viewership-wise, monetization-wise in the Hollywood business, but Palisades, as you know, and Altadena, quite frankly, for a lot of below-the-line craftsmen, were both big neighborhoods for a lot of people in Hollywood. So it's been a little bit of a triple threat storm, to say the least.
Yeah, I was there in '93 during the riots, and you could not ride on the freeways or even the side streets. So I'm sure it's a lot like that, just a big old mess and the hot heat, and nobody's happy. And it just takes away a lot of the la la land from Hollywood, right?
Yeah, it's I would say it's probably something that's impacted a lot of us more than you would think, just from the fact that almost everyone on the west side of LA knows a dozen or more people that lost homes. And when you get over to the east side of Los Angeles or up into the San Gabriel Valley or San Fernando, everybody knows somebody in Altadena that lost a home, and that's a really big deal. I mean, you're talking about 15,000 families that are displaced, and imagine extrapolating that to Franklin, Tennessee. That would be a majority of that town, probably.
Could be the whole town. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people from your area. It's the last straw. They've been hanging on by their skin of their teeth anyway with all the regulations and the Gavin Newsomness and the taxes and the this and the that and the crime and homelessness. And this is it. They're like a very famous chef is like, yeah, we're done. We're coming to a town near you.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do with 72 and sunny every day. I mean, you sort of get what you pay for in terms of weather. But there's a lot of other issues that California has, and when these things impact people that have sort of been immune from a lot of the issues that California has, it suddenly is that not in my backyard type of scenario. And you have seen a lot of people decide, hey, this is getting a little too much for me. I want to flee to Nashville. I want to flee to Austin, or I want to flee to the mountains, whatever it is.
And the business was always either defense or Hollywood. And there's a viral clip going around where Rob Lowe, who's been in the business longer than I've been alive, basically said it's cheaper to take the whole crew to Ireland to do a production than to go across the street from his office in Burbank and actually get it done. Do you find that to be the case, that California's uh, economic environment for making movies is kind of dead?
Well, look, I'm a pro-America kind of person. So when I look at the production business of Hollywood, I'm not necessarily somebody that's completely pro-California. I mean, obviously, I'd love to see more production in my neighborhood and around the area so we don't have to get on planes and fly around the country. But to me, the more important facet is to make sure that we're manufacturing what we're best in the world in, which is making entertainment content somewhere in the United States of America. So we were talking earlier about a studio that I'm helping build with a variety of other really smart people there in Franklin, Tennessee, and we just shot our first live action film, and we did it all in the state of North Carolina, and we're doing all the post production in Tennessee. So we feel really good about the fact that we're employing Americans on film sets, below the line, above the line. It's an all American cast. And it's a story that I think not only will play well across the country, but also has a real shot globally too, because we do make great entertainment content here in the United States of America that the world will consume. So I'd love to see more production done here.
That's right. Would have been nice if Rob had said North Carolina or Tennessee instead of Ireland, but the point was that California is the last place to work, not first. I always like to read an author, one of their reviews, especially when it's 5 stars like this one. Someone going by Scott Stoops gave you a 5 out of 5 stars. Amazing, magical, wonderful, exciting, fresh, fun, and awesome read. It doesn't get much better than that. I'm a big reader of any book relating to the entertainment industry, and I find in general they can be either too inside baseball or too vague, with precious few books hitting the sweet spot of being engaging for a wide audience as well as insightful to industry professionals. Feeding the Dragon is one that hits the sweet spot, which is all the more impressive because much of the book is devoted to exploring US-China relations and the specifics of co-productions and the deal-making process. Is that what you envision folks like Scott getting out of this when you wrote it?
Well, I might have to send a check to Scott for that nice review. I appreciate that, Scott, wherever you are.
I'll accept it on his behalf because I read it out loud.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm flattered when people actually take the time to even read the book or listen to it on audio. It's always really humbling and an honor that somebody in this world where everybody's so busy actually takes the time out to sort of read what was in your mind. I tried to make that the book, which came out, geez, it's almost 5 years ago now. It's crazy, but that book was really my sort of liar's poker, my Michael Lewis type of business memoir. But one I wrote in a 3 act structure and one that I really wanted to have engaging and entertaining, hoping to leave whoever read it with a bunch of interesting lessons that they just sort of subtly absorb without even knowing it. So a lot of people were thoroughly entertained by it because there are a lot of colorful, crazy adventures that happen when you're working in such a chaotic market as China. But then on top of it, I found it really interesting that uh, true experts on China, ones that I really respect, that know a lot more about that market than I could ever know, read the book and felt like I delivered at a level where they were not only entertained, but they also thought I hit the expert notes good enough, which was a very tough nuance to do because you're not trying to bore anybody that maybe just wants a basic understanding of China, but you also don't want to look like a fool to the people that really understand China.
Yeah, if you're going to write a book to the masses, you can't do alchemy of finance like George Soros's book, straight up, Econ 101. It has to be that. And you did it. Good job. America imports more goods from China than it exports to China. In 2024, the U.S. goods trade deficit with China was $295 billion, which is a very large number, but it represents a decrease compared to previous years. 143 billion to them, 440 billion into us. Critics say Trump's tariffs are hurting us and causing inflation. What's your opinion?
Well, number one is on the trade deficit. In fact, I think the USTR released a new number that came out about how we decreased our trade deficit with China quite a bit. We still have a really long way to go. I mean, we definitely import way more from them than we export to them. But the Trump administration is working on that. And I think tariffs is one of those ways they're doing it, not just for China, but with various other countries, both allies and quite frankly, markets that we don't necessarily get along with all that well. I like the tariff policy. I think there's been a lot of sort of strong arming with, say, headline grabbing tariffs to then create the leverage and sort of the noise to get serious about the negotiations and get real deals done. But if I look at what tariffs are, they really are a border policy in a way. So if you have a strong border and a strong tariff policy that essentially eliminates the threat of manufacturing and production finding the cheapest form of employment and workers, then you're actually protecting the American populace overall. So strong border policy protects us from very low wage labor coming into the market and causing a decrease in wages for American workers. The same thing that tariffs do. Tariffs essentially incentivize companies to keep their production here on the ground or reshore it in order to avoid the penalties that might make the difference between, oh, we'll offshore the production, save money. Uh-oh, now we're penalized. We better bring it back on shore and employ American workers because it's all the same.
Okay. Another five-star review, B. Lloyd said, Fenton refers to it as a memoir, but what struck me, it's not a memoir as much as it's a mission statement about reflecting on his past experience that is fueling a passion going forward. So you said it, the book came out in 2020, so 5 years ago. Looking back, is B. Lloyd right? Did it fuel your passions afterwards?
Well, it did mainly because look, the opportunity of working between the US and China in the days where China really wasn't an open market and you had the opportunity to open it to the products and services of the United States of America and be a part of some of those products and services was a great way to have a career, a lucrative career, an interesting career, a colorful career, a chaotic career. The kind of stuff where someday you're on your deathbed and you're going, God, I guess I sort of lived the most I could out of the years I had, right? But on top of it, there was a higher calling that almost all of us had, which was, okay, yeah, there's a lucrative career here, but it was also spreading the aspirational quality of democracy inside a communist country every time we get a product and service from the United States into that market. It also brings dollars out of a market that had never been taken out of that market into the United States, which grows jobs here, which creates GDP growth. So there was that higher calling that we were all under essentially the mission and purpose of because we were told that was the mission and purpose. And then over time, we started to realize, well, maybe that was a bit of a mirage, right? Like maybe the long-term ramifications of what we were doing wasn't in the best interest of the United States of America. And over time, all of us, whether in politics, whether in military, whether in private sector, public sector, you name it, we all had that punch in the nose moment where we realized, wait a minute, this isn't in the best interest of America. And I think I need to come out and talk about it. And that's what the book did. It sort of got us to how we got into this position. And then it led with some thought, mainly in the afterward, of, hey, maybe we should rethink the way we're doing this. And ever since the book came out, I've been a strong proponent on a constructive level of how do we right the playing field? How we continue to avoid a kinetic conflict with the other superpower? That superpower is not going away anytime soon. But how do we flip the scale and say, hey, look, we need to start protecting U.S. interests. We need to put patriotism before capitalism.
Interesting. So what was your biggest accomplishment in that 5 year time window?
Not having an exit ban put on me. I was able to get back to the US whenever I needed to. No, I would say the biggest accomplishments were probably the ones that were loudest and the most high profile. I mean, proudest accomplishments in life always involve family and my kids and all that stuff. But like, if I think about it career-wise, what were the ones that like grabbed headlines and grabbed people's attention as, oh my God, I can't believe these things are getting done and who's doing that and how is it getting done? And I would say probably a lot of that was around Iron Man 3, which was by far the largest box office movie ever for China, and we did all kinds of really interesting things to get that movie into the market, to make it work in that market, to hire people in that market, to shoot in that market, stuff that had never been done before, including even the promotion of having the first full-blown movie premiere there. So we were on the cover of everything from Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, et cetera, because those things had never been done before. And to me, that's the most fulfilling thing you can do in a career is sort of create a new business and make it work and do things that have never been done before. There's no case study history and essentially become the case study history of others that want to do the same thing.
Yeah, Iron Man 3 was a good one. In the movie Top Gun Maverick, Tom Cruise's character Maverick wears a jacket with a Taiwanese flag patch. The patch was initially removed.
It's not Taiwan, it's China.
Was it a China
Okay.
patch?
Oh, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, oh no,
No,
there's no.
I'm sorry. I thought it was in Beijing. I was trying to correct you there.
Oh, okay. Oh, right, right. One China. Well, in America, the trailer, they removed it. And if you remember, you do, leading to speculation that the change was made to appease China's censors as China considered Taiwan part of its territory, as you jokingly said. However, although it's true, however, that flag was restored in the final movie version, causing some to praise the decision as a stand against Chinese censorship. The film's depiction of the Taiwanese flag has led to speculation that it may be banned in China. It was. Despite this, the movie was a massive global success, grossing nearly $1.5 billion worldwide. Do you think China has lost its ability to dictate terms to Hollywood?
Um, Well, first of all, that was Top Gun, and Top Gun isn't necessarily a movie that's going to work in a country that its government isn't a huge fan of, say, our military or our system of government, nor wants to propagandize our prowess as a military power. So the chances of that movie actually getting into China or at least doing business in China were pretty slim to begin with. The complication with it was that it did have some Chinese investment in it through Tencent. So initially, there was this push of, hey, let's please our Chinese investment partner and make sure they don't get in trouble because there is a Taiwanese flag, which is not recognized by Beijing, on the patch of that jacket and hope no one notices. Well, everybody did notice. And then that becomes a big PR geopolitical issue for Paramount and Skydance, the studios behind it, and Tom Cruise, quite frankly. So, to appease people and to also weigh the positives and negatives of maybe not getting the movie into China, I think they did the right thing and said, hey, let's put the patch back on and, screw what Beijing says. They didn't leave a lot of money on the table by making that happen. But it definitely causes issues for, say, Skydance and Paramount moving forward and a lot of the filmmakers involved. In fact, to the point where I would have argued that maybe Tom Cruise would have issues getting into China. And quite frankly, I was a little surprised that several years later, Mission Impossible actually did get a release in China. It did not do very well. But I guess Tom Cruise was able to transcend that the stink from Top Gun and Beijing decided to let it in anyway.
Yeah, really interesting test cases. And Skydance Media merged with Paramount Global, which includes Paramount Pictures. There were concerns raised about the potential for Chinese government influence due to Tencent's minority ownership stake in Skydance. Have you ever bumped into Tencent and have to deal with them?
I've bumped into all those essentially the big behemoths, which is Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. You at some point you have to do business with them because they are platforms. They're the big internet giants over there. So yes, to answer your question, I have come across them several times.
They tried to do something I thought was clever. Born to Fly was officially scheduled to release on September 30th, the day before China's National Day holiday, was supposed to be China's answer to Top Gun with hot young Chinese test pilots and heart-stopping aerial acrobatics until they saw Tom's movie and then they killed it. So maybe maybe Tom is stronger than the entire Communist Party of China. Even Disney only made 3.5 million on Wish, and Woke Little Mermaid failed with some attributing it to a racist backlash against Hale Bailey. Isn't that odd since they use racist and jingoistic stuff against us that the movie that was for them failed?
There's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of nuance to that question. I mean, first of all, racism is rampant in that country. It's just a cultural fact. On top of it, I think there was a very strong push to try to create cultural relevance in movies coming from Hollywood and force feeding it in there and having the consumer in China digest it when, quite frankly, it just felt really forced and unnatural, and they decided not to. At the same time, we're also seeing a domestic industry that we built, that they stole a lot of our process tech, essentially created all kinds of protectionist policies through quotas and exit taxes and all kinds of other systems to essentially allow their infant industry to grow and thrive. Now they make movies as good as we do that are specifically catered to their market. So it is completely taken away market share from us anyway. Forget the racism or any of the other culturally sort of sensitive parts of some of these stories. They just simply make movies that their consumer wants to digest more than us. And of course, the government helps push that. If you look at, say, back when we made the movie Looper with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis, that came out in 2012, there
Great
were a
movie.
lot of weeks where 80 cents on the dollar was coming from Hollywood movies in that market. It was so bad that the Beijing government had to come in and say, hey, look, theaters that make more than 50 cents of every dollar from foreign films are going to get taxed on anything over 50%, right? Cut to today, 5% of the market is us, if
Oh,
that. I mean, we haven't had $100 million movie over there in a long time. I mean, even the biggest hits, Jurassic World, something that should easily do $500 million, I think is around 70 million right now. And that's a real big aberration from the rest of them.
that's amazing. Well, some of the biggest names in Hollywood obviously don't translate over there because they're not Chinese. You work with Bruce Willis and Looper, Iron Man 3 with Robert Downey Jr., over 20 credits as producer. I heard Bruce was hard to work with, and so is Downey. Did you get along with them in a special way? Bruce doesn't work anymore, obviously. He's sick.
Yeah, Bruce was a little tricky. I mean, he's obviously a big star, and you put up with a lot of different things with some of these movie stars because they are so important to the movie, and you know, they guarantee a certain amount of box office. He had a great performance in Looper, so despite some of the difficulties and challenges of working with him, we ended up getting a really good movie. Robert Downey Jr., on the other hand, was a pleasure to work with, and in fact, it was very adventurous. We tried to get Bruce Willis to come to China. Ultimately, he wasn't able to come for a premiere. So we ended up a year later convincing Robert Downey Jr. to be the first big movie star on the ground in China, doing a full-blown movie premiere inside the Forbidden City, which is the heartbeat of the, you know, essentially the center of all China and Beijing. And he was fantastic to the point where for 2 days straight, we had him promoting the heck out of anything that had to do with Iron Man 3. And then because a bird hit his windshield of his plane, and was had to get fixed down in Hong Kong, he had an extra day on the ground, and he just decided to put a hoodie on with his bodyguard, who didn't really look like your stereotypical bodyguard, and they walked the city and went to museums without anybody even noticing it was him.
Wow. Shane Black and he have worked together a bit, and on Iron Man 3, of course. 1.7 billion box office for Shane. I think that's less than you, though. Writer and director. Any fond memories of Shane Black?
Well, I mean, Shane did a great job with Iron Man 3. That was the only project I worked on him with. You know, I think if anything, I mean, the most challenging thing he did was he said he was never going to be on the ground in China at Comic-Con, which the Chinese government found out about, and we were about to move production into China, which, by the way, we never had Shane Black doing. We had all second unit, but for Beijing, you're trying to put on a show that you got first unit and everybody there, and you're taking the country seriously, and you're doing all the stuff that they want you to do. So when Shane sort of said, "Yeah, I'm not going with the crew," it created a lot of issues that we had to sort of get around. So that was the one drawback with working with him. All positives though, as far as the movie he delivered, because boy, did it do a lot of box office.
It did. It was probably one of the best of the three, except the first one obviously is unique because it was the first of all the Marvel universe. Do you think this merger with that we just talked about will completely change the movie making landscape for Disney and Warner Brothers and Amazon? And I'm talking about this new Paramount Global.
Well, I mean, the best part about that is that it keeps another studio alive, because without that merger, it's questionable whether Paramount could have continued as a standalone studio, and having one more studio go away would have been just completely devastating to a town that's already devastated by disruption and fires, like we talked about.
Yeah.
So, I would say, if anything, it allows us to hold on a little longer to the traditional way that movie making is done and distributed and sort of seen by audiences around the world. I would argue it's probably a bit of a ticking clock how long any of these legacy studios stick around for, at least in sort of their current form. I think even today we saw Warner Brothers announce 10% layoffs across the board. I think that's just sort of the beginning of all this. It's unfortunate. I'd like to say, oh, it's just the Hollywood industry that's facing this, but no, it's industries around the world in all kinds of categories. We're just moving into that day and age of the human race.
Same time, you have to worry about AI and all the rest. Your book was published by Post Hill Press, is owned and operated by Anthony Zaccardi. He also serves as the publisher for the company. Zaccardi previously worked in corporate publishing for major houses like HarperCollins, Random House, and Simon and Schuster. He founded Post Hill Press in 2013 after leaving corporate publishing. Did you ever meet him? And was China a topic hard for you to find a publisher for, like Simon and Schuster? They withdrew the rights for Hillary Clinton's book, Living History, after the Chinese publishers wanted them to cut those pages.
Yeah, did I meet Anthony? Yes, I did. In fact, he was really proactive in trying to get the book through his imprint. He promised the distribution through Simon and Schuster, which was the most important aspect of it, but he had the guts back. I mean, it seems crazy, but in 2019, when I made that deal, and the deal was really to tell this fun story, like I just said, about um, you know, putting business together with a market that was completely infant and chaotic and crazy, but huge with promise, right? And just the incredible sausage making chaos of what that all comprised, and putting that into a book and telling really fun stories and putting movie stars in there and in the story mix, and all the fun interactions with them, to the Kobe Bryants and the Michael Phelps and everybody else in between that we had in there. That was what the story was. It was like this timeless, tell us how we got from 2000 to 2015 in the US China dynamic. Like, why did it happen? How did it happen? Well, here's one guy's story, right? But what everybody was,
I'm gonna put my copy right next to my Dean Acheson, President of the Creation, and Diary of an Economic Hitman. I mean, you were right there early on in the China Hollywood uh, uh, Big Bang.
well, thank you. I'm honored by that. And honestly, like, I mean, the reason I bring that up is that there was nothing nefarious or pernicious or anti even Beijing about the book. And it was definitely not anti-China or anti-Asian. But a lot of publishers were really sort of nervous about it. They were like, "Oh, what happens to our China business? What happens to all the people we're involved with that are involved with our China business? What happens to our investors' business that's involved with China if we do this book?" So fortunately, Anthony had the balls to say, "I'm going to do it," and he made a great pitch for it. And Simon Schuster had the guts to essentially put it out there across the all the bookstores and put the promotional tour out and all that stuff. So it all worked out. But I did find in the promotion of it and getting on television, I could get on Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham or Maria Bartiromo or Steve Bannon anytime I wanted to. But to get on CNBC or CNN or MSNBC, it was almost impossible because there was this fear of talking about China, just talking about China, let
Yeah.
alone talking poorly about China.
They never knew what you're going to say.
Yep.
And, Hillary's book was 2003. Yours came out 17 years later, 2020. Do you think Simon and Schuster would have the balls to stand up to them today, 2025?
I do. And a lot of it doesn't have to do with, and by the way, we're all in capitalism, right? So there's a certain amount of you got to balance like the constructiveness of maybe something that you're doing that could hurt your balance sheet or hurt your investors or hurt yourself. You always have to do that calculus. I mean, it's not like everybody just goes out and decimates their business for no reason, right?
Right.
Um, I think if you look at the media world now in terms of the way they're fearful of China or making China upset, it's abated a bit, mainly because the market doesn't have the promise it used to. So the calculus of, say, doing the right thing can offset what you lose in that market now. Whereas doing what we would consider the right thing 5 years ago, everybody's like, no, could never do that. And 10 years ago, for sure not.
It's very much like the cultural apex or where we hit the wall between an American company like Simon and Schuster that has a free speech right in the Constitution trying to do business in China that does not have that right. And therefore, the same thing with their culture. They don't want to see Tom Cruise jumping around on trains. They want to see their own superheroes and their own people doing that. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing that you were able to be the novel for, and now they have to work it out as more of a capitalistic business bottom line. How are our investors going to be treated well? Do we want to stand up and say, screw you, we're putting the Taiwan flag on there or not? And if not, you're going to take an economic hit. Investors don't really like that. So what do you like better, the literary world or the movie business?
Oh,
I
well,
guess I
I
should
like
say,
to.
or the professor at University of Southern California business. You have three businesses.
Yeah. I really love the entertainment business and the entertainment business around storytelling. So personally, I don't really care. I'm platform agnostic, right? Like, so if you got a great story to tell and you can put it in a book, fantastic. If you got a great story to tell and it looks great on the big screen or maybe on the small screen or in YouTube shorts or whatever it is, fantastic. What's the story that you want to tell? Why do you think it's engaging? How are you going to make it engaging? And then figure out, okay, well, what's the platform that's best for it? Like, how long is it, right? I mean, that's why you're seeing a lot of, say, feature writer directors and producers in the television space. Why? Because they realize the story they want to tell takes place over, say, 10 hours of content, right? It might not fit into a 90-minute or 120-minute format. So I think now with the way platforms are set up, the way the ecosystem is set up, it's almost utopia for storytellers because you never have to think about, oh, can I make it in 22-minute episodes so we have our 8 minutes of promos and commercial breaks on network television. When you watch something on Netflix or HBO nowadays, sometimes the succession might be an hour and 10 minutes long, or sometimes it's 43 minutes long. It's just as long as it takes to tell that one story, right? So it's sort of a perfect world, even though it's very disruptive and everybody's trying to gather their sort of balance during it all.
Yeah. You began your career as an agent at William Morris Agency. They bought Endeavor since and are huge, WME now. If you got to go back and meet yourself while earning an engineering degree from Cornell, working at Olive Garden, would you tell yourself to do anything differently? Maybe stick with engineering and forget this movie or foreign relations stuff?
That's a really good question because I would argue that uh, whatever gives you the most comfort and makes you the most money might not be the best way to live a life. But the fact is, I think our society, and I think it's a fault of the way society has grown, particularly I would say since maybe the 2000s or maybe after the great financial crisis, this huge sort of stress and push for wealth and who has the most money has the most sort of ability to have the most freedoms and do the most things and influence the most things. I would even think about Cornell University back when I was an agent. In the 90s, I wasn't making that much money, but I had a very interesting career, and they would always invite me back to go speak. And I wasn't a billionaire, but they would ask me to come back and speak. And then when I built my own business in production and management, they would always want to have me come back and talk about the movie business and the television business and all of that. And then eventually that changed to, all right, who's making the most money? Let's get those hedge fund people back. Let's get those private equity people back. And the world of arts, suddenly didn't seem as important, or the world of, say, journalism, or the world of maybe just being a great lawyer or a doctor, right? So there's a part of me that thinks you create a lot of freedom and influence by having the most money you could possibly make. So I might argue that if I could have done it again, I would have learned what the private equity world was, right? Oh yeah, you wouldn't be happy doing that at this age. Well, quite frankly, I'd probably be retired and doing something that maybe is really important that doesn't even involve making money, right? But at the same time, I find it hard to believe that I could have lived the life that, if it ended right now, I'd be like, wow, I did it probably as good as I possibly could have, and
Oh,
I think that's sort
that's
of the
that's
goal.
awesome. That is the goal. That's awesome. What advice would you give a young producer today? The business has changed so much since those films of 2012 and 13 you did. Any tips?
Well, that's quite frankly why people pay the big bucks to go to USC because they hear my tips in those rooms in private, right?
I already paid
Um,
that. I already paid it.
but I will say, there's a lot of hesitation to utilize things like AI and technology when it comes to final exams or projects or any of that kind of stuff. And what I try to push is the fact that I want everybody to use anything they have available to try to get ahead in an ethical and moral and legal way in the business. It's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And telling stories is going to continue to change in the way that it's done. And you should know how to do that. And you should try to keep your eye on the ball and know the quickest and most efficient way to get your stories told, to monetize it, and to build a career. So when I look at the business today and wonder, what am I supposed to be teaching the students, right? It's very hard to get into the micro of what these kids should be doing 15, 20 years from now because I really don't know what that's going to be, nor do most. So I always go back to the basics and I call it own all the tickets, right? To make it in life, and particularly to make it in the entertainment business, which is typically not a cream rises to the top type of world, you got to win the lottery. And what's the best way to win the lottery? Well, try to own all the tickets. So, how do you do that? You meet everybody you can, learn everything you can from all those people, meet all the people they know, absorb everything you can from reading and watching and understanding and being mentored and all that stuff, and constantly keep your eyes out for every opportunity and build relationships and build that essentially immunity to downfalls that you're going to have throughout your career. And eventually you'll end up winning that lottery or some version of it and you'll be fulfilled. But that's the key, is like really the macro. It's that drive, it's that want to learn and that passion that's going to push you through all this disruption. You'll find opportunities.
Yeah, that's amazing. You and I have something in common. You're a John H. Mitchell professor at the University of Southern California. I'm an alumni. We're a shirt. Got my minor in film. Has USC kept up with other international film schools as the best, or is it getting kind of left behind maybe because, California is so crazy. That's where it's located. We didn't have cell phones, garage band software, Spotify, Opus Clips, and all this amazing tech to do it here. We used splicers and this tape stuck to your fingers. It was so strong, and cameras weighed a ton, and you had to take out insurance to rent them to do your class project. Now you just whip out your phone, tripod, and you are George Lucas. To think the $250,000 for 4-year film school system can survive the GoPro and Apple digital revolution?
Well, I may argue, I mean, the thing that you go to USC Film School for is essentially when you start your career, start at like second base instead of in the basement of the fax room like I did at William Morris. You get that leg up as far as having some internships during college. You have this network that's going to help you get that first job and help you get to that second job. You even, I think, USC has this program where for 5 years they guarantee they'll keep you employed, right? So
Yeah, we
that's
didn't have
something.
that, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's something that you don't have when you come out of other schools. But I would also argue that film school is pretty specific. And in today's world, I don't know. I would argue that you're probably better off getting a more rounded education, maybe say in business or something, and maybe minor in storytelling of some aspects, and at least have that ability where you're seeing and touching and feeling a lot of things that are probably way more practical than what a film education would teach you, and get some of the basics from essentially the side minor or maybe some of the hobbies that you have while you're doing that. And then come out to Hollywood, start at the bottom and work your way up. Because quite frankly, we all end up roughly at the same place in the same amount of time, say after 10 years. So, and I can always say, well, at least I do have an engineering degree, so I might be able to talk somebody into thinking that maybe I'm valuable because I know how to program in BASIC or whatever else, you know. But yeah, I don't. I would say to anybody that's aspiring to be a storyteller, you don't necessarily have to pay the $100,000 a year to go to USC. There's other ways that you can do it, and most of it is pretty street smart hustle coming out here, starting at the bottom and working your way up.
Okay, I won't tell Carol Folt that you said that, but she's not there anymore, so it doesn't really matter. For 14 years as president of DMG Entertainment, a multi-billion-dollar global media company headquartered in both Beijing and Los Angeles, you pioneered the successful execution of co-productions and collaborations between Chinese and American firms to circumvent Beijing's strict trade barriers, providing unrivaled access to the world's second largest consumer market. Is that still possible today?
No, not in the film business, it's not. I mean, we were doing a lot of, I guess you can say, sort of clever tricks to get Beijing to feel like, oh, this movie works for us because of X, Y, and Z. But a lot of that also had to do with we understood we could sell China fish if we taught them how to fish, you know, and we never, and this is a fault of ours or in myself, we never really thought of that in the long-term damaging respects. We just saw it as, wow, we're getting these movies in. This is great for the US. But eventually we taught them so well that now they catch their own fish and they feed the fish they catch to their consumers. So we've
Mm,
lost
mm.
that market. And then on top of it, a lot of the tricks we used, Beijing got a little wiser too and understood that, like, hey, all these companies in any category are always trying to create some sort of an edge. And if it doesn't really benefit Beijing, then they're usually going to say no to it or push it out of the market.
Interesting. Feeding the dragon also goes into the NBA. What was the draw of China and the NBA in the first place? Do you think they maybe miscalculated also, and the interest is or isn't there for American basketball?
Well, basketball was huge going back decades when the missionaries were over there, sort of pushing that as a sport that could catch on in Beijing because of the common ground that even people in China could do in terms of like learning how to dribble and shoot something through a hoop. It was very different than say hockey or football or something like that. And then on top of it, and you could play it in the cities or out in the countryside. You didn't need a lot of space. And over time, you start to see it build as one of the national sports. And then eventually Michael Jordan and David Stern went over there in the early 90s and really jump started that awareness and interest in the NBA. Michael Jordan became a huge star in China, one of the first American celebrities to gain that type of status and to sell things in that market. And then it grew from there. And eventually, by the way, China said, "Hey, will you teach us how to fish so we can catch our own fish?" And NBA created the CBA, the Chinese NBA. And after Daryl Morey sent out that infamous tweet back in 2019, as I was trying to sell my book, what was it? Stand for freedom. Wait, fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong. As the GM of the Houston Rockets, Beijing said, wait a minute, we don't support that type of tweet. We're going to shut the NBA out of the market for a long, long time. And when the NBA got shut out of that market, quite frankly, at probably the peak of their earning potential back then in 2019, the CBA took up a lot of that lost ground. So now you have the NBA still meaning something over there, but not in the way it used to. Although I would argue this new star that just was drafted this year from China could help that.
I must say, when I hear billionaires like LeBron and that very rich Spurs coach, Greg Popovich, said that he was thrilled that NBA Commissioner Adam Silver responded to that tweet by Maury that created that global firestorm. I can't say I felt bad for them. Basically, great affinity for the people of China while also taking a stand for the free speech of the NBA players. You can't do it. It's like we just talked about the cultural clash. Is it just all about selling jerseys and shoes in China for those guys?
Yeah, well, it's about capitalism. I mean, it's all about the buck, always about the buck. And, some people, I think, I mean, I'd like to believe, especially now in terms of China, I'm much more enlightened about it. But most people that are fans of capitalism do it in an ethical, moral, and legal way. And I think with the awareness of what we know about China now, there's a lot more reticence in terms of doing things that might be detrimental to the country or the principles and values that we stand up to. Yet there's still big enough paychecks that get some people quiet about it too. So those people, I think, are less and less right now than they used to be. In fact, I know they're a lot less than there used to be, but you'll still have that.
It's just so transparent. Trump says he wants to win the AI race with China. We have a lot more data centers in operation and coming online than China. They're not even in the race, it seems like. Do you think the last strike in Hollywood about AI using actors' images and taking over for Writers Guild, screenwriters, and such, does all that AI power ultimately kill Hollywood artists, humans?
Well, there obviously the guilds are trying to mitigate how quickly the use of AI is going to be implemented into storytelling, right? Whether that is going to be mitigated enough to save jobs, I would probably doubt that. But at least their slowing down of it is allowing people to think about it a little more and perhaps put a pause button on it if it seems like something that needs to be analyzed a bit more. China has no regulations, no sandbox that anybody has to play in terms of AI technology. So that's where it's a bit of an issue because without those guardrails, are going to advance AI technology a lot faster in many different categories and industries than we will here because we might be a little more thoughtful about it or a tad more thoughtful. So that's why this race is going to be really interesting and challenging and vital to try to win. But I'm not sure our ability to completely leave it unregulated, and I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, is going to allow us to get ahead of China because they're going to go reckless with it for sure.
Yeah, they have less guardrails, which brings me to my last question. You're a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, Producers Guild of America, Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. I do not know when you sleep. Again, big, powerful circles that you run in. How does the Producers Guild help or hurt you do the job of making movies in countries without unions?
Uh, well, that's a good question. I mean, the Producers Guild is a pretty good resource for producers as far as having a knowledge base and research and analysis that can help people on the ground in different markets. To me, I'm all focused on doing as much here in the United States of America as possible. So the Producers Guild is doing a lot of things that allow us the ability to get our incentives and rebates back quicker, so the cash flow out is more balanced. They're actually pushing the guilds to essentially lower the thresholds of, say, holdbacks on, say, extra money in escrows to cover, say, PH&W costs or future PH&W costs, pension, health, and welfare costs. And then on top of it, they are pushing, not as a lobbyist group or as a industry organization, but they are pushing through PR and pressure various entities and associations and lobbyists to essentially push for more incentives, rebates, subsidies, and promotional things that can occur in the state, on the state side of the issue, to help keep more production here on shore. And then there's a lot of us trying to push the US government to essentially say, screw like thinking about just California and LA. Let's think about the US. And we are one country that does not have a national film commission in order to essentially put incentives on the table for productions to stay here. I believe there's 77 around the world that
Yeah.
do.
Canada, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, well, Canada for sure. And Canada has some places that, in provinces, if you're in certain regions, you might get as much as 60% rebate on anything you shoot. So it's very hard to compete with that. The UK the same way. And as we see currencies start to rebalance a little bit, we're going to see a little of that come in the direction of us and help us a little. But we still need to have a federal program to help complement these state programs.
That's right, because there's no way that Burbank's ever going to compete with the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. Chris, Professor Fenton, thank you for your time. We are at the end here, so please tell our listeners where they can go to find out more about you, follow your social media, or anything else.
Yeah, well, I'm at the Dragon Feeder, and obviously, if you go to feedingthedragonbook.com, you can get a copy of my book. I love interacting with people on DM there or on Instagram, and I look forward to meeting people that are really curious about the world that I found myself in, not through any sort of intentions, but just that's how fate and the universe and God put me.
The world you created. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on with us. Hang on, folks. I will be right back.
Sing a song about the heartland, the only place I feel at home. Sing about the way you good man. Words do a thing.
Huh. I don't know. Thanks for coming back. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That is how we grow and keep this content free for you. It's not a USC education. Now, the Heartland Journal news. Let's kick it off like I used to when I was in grade school. I think we quit doing this around fifth grade, maybe sixth grade in California. Some of you listening may never have had to do it if you were born after 2000. Listen to Red Skelton, best known for his national radio and television shows between 1937 and 1971, especially as host of the television program The Red Skelton Show, as he explains in detail the words of the Pledge of Allegiance. Producer Steve, if you will.
Whoa. Hold on. Here we go.
To the seventh grade. I went to the seventh grade. I left home when I was 10 years old because I was hungry. And I used to, this is true. I work in the summer, I go to school in the winter. But I had this one teacher. He was the principal of the Harrison School in Vincennes, Indiana. To me, this was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time, anyhow. He had such wisdom. And we were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day. And he walked over, this little old teacher, Mr. Laswell was his name. Mr. Laswell. And he says, he says, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester, and it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word. I, Me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge. Dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, oh glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts freedom is everybody's job. United. That means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose. All divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose. And that's love for country. And to the republic. Republic. A state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people. And it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. For all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. And now, boys and girls, let me hear you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance, under God. Wouldn't it be a pity if someone said that is a prayer and that would be eliminated from schools too?
And guess what happened? All right, next subject, how Gavin Newsom turned a $100 million wildfire benefit concert into a money laundering operation for his friends and pet nonprofits. What?
No.
Remember the Fire Aid LA concert? It raised $100 million for wildfire victims. They told donors the money would go directly to people who needed it. But that was a lie. Fire Aid later admitted, we don't give money directly to individuals. They handed the cash to 188 nonprofits instead. Many had nothing to do with wildfire relief. One group got money to build a more humane and democratic society. Another funded natural helpers for health equity. Others didn't even apply. They just got paid. Meanwhile, actual fire victims like David Howard, who lost 2 homes, got nothing. Quote, none of my friends or neighbors received a dime, he said. But the real kicker, one of the listed nonprofits, Cal Volunteers, was created by Gavin Newsom and his wife. No history, no transparency. When people noticed, Fire Aid quietly deleted Cal Volunteers from their website. No statement, no disclosure of how much money they got, just vanished. So to recap, Newsom botched fire prevention, victims suffer, he launches a relief concert, funnels cash to his own nonprofit, scrubs the evidence. This isn't just corruption, it's a laundering loop. Congress member, caucus, NGO, shell nonprofit run by family friends, your tax dollars laundered. Democrats love to say no PACs. What they don't say is how many nonprofits they use to do the same thing, just with tax write-offs. What Fire Aid did isn't relief, it's theft. What Newsom did isn't leadership, it's racketeering. And somehow this guy still thinks he's presidential material. Lawyers suing Gates and Borla for COVID vax injuries arrested and imprisoned in Netherlands. The Netherlands got full fascist in a Gestapo reminiscent late night arrest of attorney Arno van Kessel 1 month before trial against Gates et al. Began. In a stunning expression of the globalist fascist takeover of the Netherlands police have arrested Arno van Kessel, the lead attorney suing Bill Gates, Albert Boura, Mark Rutte et al. For COVID-19 vaccine injuries. The civil process was scheduled to begin on July 9th. Mr. Van Kessel was arrested in a Gestapo reminiscent early morning raid by parliamentary police on June 11th, when he was reportedly blindfolded, bound, and taken into detention, where he remains almost 2 months later. Readers will note my tardiness in reporting this stunning story. The reason is because both the European and the American press have completely ignored both the civil trial against Gates, Borla, Rote et al., and Van Kessel's arrest. I knew nothing about Van Kessel's arrest until last night when my co-author, Dr. Peter McCullough, forwarded to me a report by InfoWars journalist Adam Salazar. Once again, the so-called conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has proved to be one of the first guys to report the shocking reality of what is going on. Salazar's report prompted me to do a Google Netherlands search with the keywords Arno van Kessel, that is Arno van Kessel arrested, and I got one search result for a June 27 report in an independent online journal called Der Andere Krans, the other newspaper. The following is an English translation. Arno van Kessel will be held in custody for an additional 90 days because the Public Prosecution Service continued to designate him as a suspect in an investigation into a criminal network, yet without presenting any evidence. This means that Leeuwarden lawyer will definitely not be present at the public hearing on July 9th in the Leeuwarden District Court, where the first substantive hearing in the internationally high-profile case against, among others, the state of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, and Bill Gates is scheduled. His partner, Peter Stassen, is on his own, but says he will appear fully equipped. In early June, this newspaper reported that there was finally some progress in the internationally high-profile lawsuit by Leeuwarden lawyer Arno van Kessen and his Eindhoven colleague Peter Stassen. In 2023, the legal duo announced they would file legal proceedings against Gates, Rutte, and the Dutch state, among others, on behalf of their clients. They want to force the judge to issue a clear ruling on the question: was the COVID-19 mRNA injection a vaccine for the benefit of the population's health or a bioweapon? Van Kessel said it's one or the other, and there's no in-betweens. The Northern Netherlands District Court, Nieuwener location, announced in early June 2025, finally, that the first substantial hearing of the case is scheduled for July 9th. Well, that would have been 2 weeks ago. On Wednesday morning, June 11th, there was a completely unexpected turn of events. Arno van Kessel was dragged from his bed early in the morning by a special intervention team with a considerable display of force. The lawyer, his daughter, and his wife were even briefly held at gunpoint. A day later, the police published a report on the website Poliet.nl linking Van Kessel to a criminal network. According to a press release issued by the Public Prosecution Service, 8 people were arrested that morning for adhering to anti-institutional ideology and possibly intending to use violence. One of them was quickly released, while the other 7 were held in restricted custody for 2 weeks, meaning the suspects were not allowed any contact with the outside world. Van Kessel, as was announced last week, was being held in a cell in Vogt. Many suspect that attorney Van Kessel has gotten too close to the truth in the coronavirus case. This has led to the case being associated with the prosecution of German lawyer Rainer Flumil. We will discuss that. Who wrote this? Where is my postscript? The arrest of Arno is yet another stunning example of how vaccine has been ruminative religion that was first erected in the 18th century. Belief in vaccines is a matter of strict orthodoxy, as we show in our new book, Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. Those who question their safety and efficacy has long been treated like those branded as heretics during the religious wars of Europe between approximately 1517 and 1647. When it comes to imposing vaccines on the public, those in power have consistently acted as though the ends justify the means, no matter how ruthless and even criminal the means may be. What is happening to Mr. Van Kessel is merely the latest persecution in which may be characterized as a vaccine religious war that has been going on for 300 years. Please check it out on Amazon.com. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Chris Fenton, for showing us that American movies are pretty much popular in America. That's about it. Everyone gets sick of everyone else at some point. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. See you all next time. Peace in our time and glory to God. Stick around for my take on the whole model named Sydney Sweeney nonsense controversy du jour conjured up on the left. You'll get a laugh, I hope. That is all.
Time travel has not yet been invented, but 30 years from now, it will have been. I am one of many specialized assassins in our present called loopers. So when criminal organizations in the future need someone gone, they zap him back to me, and I eliminate the target from the future.
Oh la la.
Loopers are well paid. We live the good life. And the only rule is never let your target escape. Even if your target is you.
I'm gonna fix this! I'm gonna find it! I'm gonna kill him!
What kind of people are we dealing with here? A set of perps with a very unusual skill set. Utah, I need a theory.
So why not deploy your chute above the jungle and escape like a normal person?
Because I'm thinking these aren't normal people, sir. I believe that, like me, the people behind these robberies are extreme athletes, using their skills to disrupt the international financial markets. And they don't care who gets killed in the process. They call me Bodie.
There's a few $1 billion of gold on there.
You're gonna steal it?
No, we're going to liberate it.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of HeartlandJournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.